lot of people in my generation are very interested in getting married, and a lot of people also wondering, should they get married, and if they are to get married, what's the right way of getting married? Christianity and prenup or anti-nuptial agreements. What's the right way of going about it? Is it biblical? Is it not biblical? Is it wrong if I don't want to sign it, or if I want to sign it, or what are the different types of marriages that are out there that people need to watch out for? I think that's what I really want to talk about. Why it's important to talk about this? Because people my generation, I think my generation is a very tricky one. We are sort of like thrown into a really crazy mixture of a crazy time that we are bridged between traditional and very current, everything that's very current and modern standards, a lot of cross-cultural crossover of ideas, So a lot of people are more open to a lot of things. And of course, which kind of marital arrangements should I really get into? I think that's one of the biggest things that I really want to talk about. And the first thing I want to talk about is, in South Africa, there's 3 types of civil marriages that people have to understand before they sort of get into. So the government has made a lot of amendments to the law that now recognizes a lot of the traditional and religious type of marriages and arrangements as having provisions being made and amended for. So we have 3 types of, I'm just going to read up for you guys. I'm just going to give you 3 types of civil marriages that people can get into, and you can read up the rest on my description. I will leave you with a list of a lot of things that are exhaustive enough for you guys to really read into, so that you can get a good understanding of what's up. A civil marriage, customary marriage, civil union, and religious marriage. Customary marriage is negotiated, that's celebrated and entered into in accordance with any of the systems, traditions, and customs of indigenous African rights. And a customary marriage is automatically considered to be in community of property as well. But this doesn't apply to religious marriage. Okay, people just gotta be aware of that. So should the couple want to be married out of community of property, an anti-nuptial agreement or contract has to be signed before the ceremony. Okay, so civil union, that is marriage entered between anyone regardless of their sexual orientation or whatever the case may be. Okay, it's a voluntary union between 2 persons of same sex or opposite sexes other than the age of 18. Religious marriage, on the other hand, even though religious marriage is not recognized as a legal marriage under South African law, the spouses in a religious marriage are protected by law in certain instances. A religious marriage is treated as a marriage out of community or property without the accrual system. Now, there's a large chunk of an explanation about that. Do look at it within the description that I've just provided. It's very important for a lot of people asking a lot of questions about this type of thing. But now my video, I would like it to be more focused around the spiritual aspect and religious aspect. Okay, for believers, should I sign a prenup or not? Is it biblical or not biblical? Now, there are a couple of things that we have to keep in mind. That yes, we don't have a biblical example as to whether or not you can sign a prenup or not sign a prenup, or the idea of marriage in community of property or not. Okay, so it's a very legal related matter. It's a legalistic, and or rather it's where legal meets religious doctrine. Religiously, what we understand is that, of course, marriage is supposed to be forever, but we all know that people divorce. Things don't always work out for people. And when it doesn't work out, what happens? Okay, do you split it 50-50, or do you, do you consider that, everybody keeps what's theirs, what's mine it's no longer yours, or whatever? I know a lot of people who kind of get married traditionally. They pay lobola and they're like, okay, marriage didn't work out. Okay, do I get my money back now? Okay, a lot of weird questions, legal questions people have about a lot of things. I think it's important to bear in mind that, okay, biblically, God didn't institute divorce. We instituted divorce. Of course, powers of the state and legal affairs will always interfere there because civilization will always grow. And we have an instance where Jesus indicated that is what Moses did. He mandated a bill of divorce because you were hard of your hearts, but that's not what God intended in the beginning. 2 shall become 1, and I think it really comes down to more of a principle-based matter. How do you really get into this with the principle of knowing that, what's mine is yours because we are one entity? You know what I mean? I think it's important for people to get into it with a good understanding of what they're getting into, because people have to be aware that when you marry in community of property, whatever it is that you have accrued before, if it's gonna be joined together, that means that you also bear the risks. If there's a lot of expenses involved and there's a lot of somebody's in debt a lot, you also bear the burden of that debt. Even if the marriage doesn't work out, your name is still in there. So you have to keep that in mind as well. That's something that people don't really know. I think people don't think about that as well. So with that said, now, a lot of times we run to the book of Romans where it talks about being subject to the government and its authorities. And that's the book of Romans chapter 13, where it talks about everyone must submit himself to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except that which God has established. Consequently, he who rebels against the authority is rebelling against God, what God has instituted. We have to be very careful about where we bring scriptures and not understand the context. Paul is talking about, or to the Romans, Christians in Rome who are subjected to the Roman governance. And in those days as well, in order for them to worship, they had to submit to whatever the government said, because Christianity was the lesser religion, or was seen as the lesser of religion. It wasn't an official belief system or official religion for that matter. So whatever they do, they have to be careful. So he was just sort of saying, be very careful, okay? Because your fate lies within your government's hands. So it was very necessary to make them aware of that. Now, with that said, is that applicable generally? Of course not. We know that if the government says that same-sex marriage is legal, it doesn't necessarily mean that we're saying that applies to the Bible as well. So therefore, it tells you that people know very well that we have to look at all the other different circumstances and other different factors around that issue. It's not a matter of just submitting to the government. So it's not just applicable in that sense, because the government has made provisions to recognize certain instances on how you deal with marital, community of property, what happens when people divorce, and etc. It's important, yes, it's great that you have to make provisions for things like that to protect people, obviously. But I think it's a decision that you have to make knowing what you're getting yourself into. A lot of people say, well, you know what, if it doesn't work out, then it's 50-50, we have to share. But I think that, again, comes down to, it's a matter of how you apply your wisdom and your knowledge. Some people get into it not realizing that it's really important to decide these things, and later on it gets really complicated. One of the reasons I'm talking about this is because it's really bothersome for a lot of men, especially people who have worked their entire lives building their businesses, especially if they're celebrities or athletes. There are women out there who target men who are doing substantially well for themselves, because they know that if there's no prenup and you didn't sign anything, goodness gracious, should it not work out, that's a lot of money for them. So it doesn't make sense to work your entire life for something and then somebody just takes half of it away. But before, it used to make sense before. If you go back in history, it was there to protect women, particularly generally because they were open to a lot of exploitation. Look at religious marriages, for example. Islam does not make room for community of property. Islamic law, anyway. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but women who are married religiously, it leaves them very vulnerable to a lot, And back in the day, it used to be like that as well. Women used to be left vulnerable a lot because they would decide to get married, raise children for almost their entire lives, give away their education, their future, to devote themselves to being housewives, because they didn't have as many rights as today. So that left them very vulnerable. And should a marriage not work out, or they be chased away, because that would be the case maybe, a man could literally just get away with just about almost anything, and there are no repercussions to a man. It falls down hard on the woman, because she's basically given her entire life away, to life that didn't really work out for her. So she stands to lose a lot more. So obviously it makes sense that the law must protect her, and she must keep, a certain portion of the assets. But today it's a different story, and a lot of people sort of wonder about that. It makes you kind of question, whereby, you're dealing with a society where women make their own money. There are women who are confident today enough to say, you know what, I make my own money, so I'm not getting married because I need your money. I make my money, whatever the case may be. And they're quite fine with entering into a relationship or marriage with the prenuptial agreement or with a contract that stipulates certain things, that whatever it is that you make, or certain assets or certain things, will not be included should the marriage not work out. They will not be included in the sharing of whatever the case might be, of whatever assets and profits. I think people have to really have an open conversation and discussion around that, a really open and honest conversation around that, okay? I think it's one of those awkward conversations, I think, but they're very, very necessary. And too many times, man, my generation, people, you're in love, we get it, but sheesh, man, you need to really get serious about this thing. People have to talk about these things. So biblically wise now, for the Christians, is there any biblical directives that give us guidelines in terms of whether or not it would be unscriptural or it would be wrong for a Christian to consider getting married with prenups, with the idea of prenuptial agreements in place? I don't think so. If there's one scripture that I think probably can be a guide, is a very famous one. We hear it in weddings and etc. Love is kind, love is patient, does not envy, is not proud. It doesn't behave itself inappropriately, doesn't seek its own way. Okay, it doesn't seek its own way and does not behave itself inappropriately. I think there are some keywords there for us. Seeking your own way is not selfish. It's not looking to only benefit itself. And when you are getting married, I would imagine that you are in a relationship where you are sharing your life with someone, and biblically speaking, two shall become one. You become one entity. So should people get married and decide to share everything goes into one pot, and whatever the case may be, then so be it. I think that's where certain individuals come to a point where they conclude that, look, if it doesn't work out, you have to share. You got to share your assets. You have to share everything. You have to split it 50-50 regardless. So it's one of those things that people have to understand. Two shall become one, and if one breaks up, it becomes two entities. So I think it's a wisdom-orientated matter. You have to get into it with a lot of knowledge and research and understanding of what you're getting yourself into. I don't think it's particularly bad for anyone to preempt and plan. Doesn't mean that I'm planning to get divorced if I put certain measures. A prenuptial agreement is kind of like any kind of contract, actually. It's sort of like something that you sign but you put away and hope that you never have to come back and look at it. Okay? Hope, by all means. Because I don't think anybody really plans in life to kind of go through certain things. I don't think anybody plans for life to turn out the way that it turns out. But with that said, guys, I think that's just what I think and feel about it. I think there are a lot of things that we can talk about with regards to this subject. I think wisdom applies. It's really up to you. I really can't dictate that for anybody. I don't think anybody can dictate to anybody what kind of marital arrangements they should have. But should you decide to sign a prenup to not include certain assets, maybe they have a family inheritance or they have a family name attached to that or whatever the case may be, and you hold them dear to your heart, etc., or it's a family business, look, it's entirely up to you. I think we all need prayers and a lot of prayers, a lot of wisdom, and a lot of guidance. Get legal opinion on the matter as well. Alright guys, that's what I think. I hope you guys are blessed with this video. I hope you learned something, and I hope it's helpful to you. It's helpful to you guys. Thanks for watching, and do like, do subscribe, do leave a comment. Let's engage. Hit that notification bell while you're at it. You'll know when I'm dropping other videos. Okay, other than that, thanks for watching, and hope I see you next time. Super, God bless.